We appreciate all of you coming out this evening for this great program to honor our fallen comrades who served so gallantly in the Republic of Vietnam during very troubled times for our country. As a Vietnam veteran, I truly appreciate the sacrifices that they've made, and it's always very difficult to lose a friend, loved one, and family members in such a terrible war. But we truly honor them, and I think it's a great opportunity to show our appreciation for everything they've done. Our curator will be presenting the program this evening. Wayne Motts was born in Central Ohio and attended the Ohio State University, receiving a Bachelor of Arts degree in history in 1989. He moved to South Central Pennsylvania and attended Shippensburg State University, where he received his master's degree in American history in 1994. Wayne is currently our full-time curator here at the Historical Society, and he's really electrified all of us with his enthusiasm for everything that he does. So without any further hesitation, I'd like to introduce our curator, Wayne Motts.
Thank you, Larry. Good evening, everyone. It would be my pleasure this evening to present a program which I always knew was going to be out there. I just wasn't, I knew this day was going to come, and I was really waiting in anticipation. And then when the day got here, I just ran around frantically here. So the staff has put up with me all day, and we appreciate that. Many of them are in the room here this evening. We appreciate your patience with me. I like to walk out a little bit. I'll try not to make you all dizzy in the program tonight over the next couple minutes here, but I do like to walk out, and I've got a pretty loud voice, so I suspect that everyone will be able to hear you. I'd like to welcome you all here to the Cumberland County Historical Society on behalf of the museum, and I'd like to tell you that the topic this evening I'll try to write, Cumberland County Serviceman Who Died in Vietnam, will be our program. It comes from a quote, an August letter written by Kenny Dever, on the bottom, one of the persons featured here in the exhibit this evening. The exhibit will run through July 4, 2003. We have asked to extend it, or been asked to extend it, because of the overwhelming response that we've had from folks coming here, veterans, citizens of the county, been very positive toward the exhibit, especially the family members. Without their cooperation, the family members helping and assisting me and the rest of the museum staff, we would not be able to mount this exhibit. I can tell you this evening that we have members of the Ream family here, Dever family here, the Leininger family here, the McHenry family here, the Steigelman family here, the Library family here, all men who served from Cumberland County who died in Vietnam. Sure, I missed anyone. Those are the ones I know are here. I'm certain there might be others around in the audience as well. Let me give you a little quick background about the topic and how this grew out, everyone. At first, I really wanted to give the program. So about a year ago or so, I started collecting information regarding men from Cumberland County who died in Vietnam. And then I started to get some phone calls. And over the process of the research, we discovered 52 names. They are in the brochure that most of you picked up in the back. Be sure to pick that up because that lists every name we have. Many of these names do appear at the Boston Library on a plaque that was provided by the Vietnam Veterans Post number 26, along with a beautiful stained glass window that was dedicated back in 1987. So this brochure is really the fruits of our labors here. It lists all the names. If anyone has additional names, and I can tell you, about a month ago we had 48 names. Now 52 names. So we found other individuals here in the county that we've been able to collect information on. But the idea for the exhibit came out of documenting the lives of the men from Cumberland County who fought in Vietnam and contacting the families. Of the 52 names on this list, I have talked to 19 of the families, spoken to them, corresponded with them, emailed them here. And those families, at least 8, have brought material that go into the cases behind you that you see here. The information that is inside the brochure came from official sources, non-official sources. It came from military service records. It came from operational records at the National Personnel Record Center in St. Louis, Missouri. Came from records in Washington, D.C., at National Archives 2, at College Park, Maryland. It came from the National Imaging Department of the United States federal government, maps related to the Vietnam era. More importantly, it came from the families. Several of the families allowed us to have access to actual letters written by some of the men that are here in the exhibit. And to read them, as let me tell you folks, pretty emotional. This whole trip's been emotional for me. You can imagine what it was like on the families. But we've had access to read some of the letters about what the men from Cumberland County thought, what they did while they were overseas, how they thought. And that's not Wayne Motts talking, that's the men who fought and died here from this county. So I think that's a pretty interesting aspect of the entire exhibit. We're actually get the written record. 100 years from now, we're all going to be gone. But the written record still remains. A valuable resource for those here in this county is the United States Army Military History Institute, which is adjacent here at Carlisle Barracks, provided a lot of operational records related to some of the men that are in the exhibit as well. I want to show you a couple slides, if I could, so if we could have the lights down. I'm going to talk and go. I'm going to talk and see slides as we go. We can get the projector. My father's in the room. He's going to take care of me here this evening. He's be my audio visual. He's doing. People always ask how I got interested in the Vietnam War. This is future curator of the Cumberland County Historical Society. On his first trip to the Vietnam War, March 1984, my father and I ventured down to Washington, D.C., wanted to see the monument. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial was dedicated in November of 1982. Today, it has 58,229 names of men, including 8 women, who died in service to their country in the Southeast Asia. On my first trip to the wall, I had the privilege of meeting veterans who were camping in a small tent holding vigil over the wall. The wall is open 24 hours a day. It is staffed by the National Park Service until 11:45 at night. And many of the veterans come and decide to meditate in the evening hours or in the late part of the day. You'll notice this veteran right here is wearing his combat infantry badge, his Purple Heart right here, his Bronze Star. And I guess they really befriended me because I was young, and I asked a lot of questions at age 17 about the history of the Vietnam War, and a lot of the veterans had not, at this time, had an opportunity to talk about that. So anytime somebody young came up and said, well, what was your service? Where were you at in the country? People then, I think, from a veteran standpoint, they really opened up. Here's a picture here. My father sent me this picture of all of us holding this first award, missing in action flag. And I noticed behind me is the state flag of my birth, Ohio, where I'm from, where I was reared. Look what this flag is. Anybody identify it? Pennsylvania. How about that? My whole destiny wrapped between 2 flags. Right here. This gentleman right here, his name is Mike Ferguson. He's a Vietnam veteran, United States Marine Corps. He's from Indiana. And he actually is a recipient of 5 Purple Hearts. He's missing both his legs. When I went down to the wall, and as part of my trip there, they were building the sidewalk to the Vietnam Memorial, the walkway, and he gave me a piece of the original walkway, which I still have in my possession. I've always been fascinated by things military and really felt very honored to be able to talk to the men and women who serve their country in Vietnam. Now, today we go to jail for this. Over the wall. Luckily, in 1984, people didn't feel that way, but this is right over the center. The wall is V-shaped. The names go from the middle all the way out the east wall and then back around to the west wall. They make full circle. They're not in alphabetical order, but they're by date of casualty, by date of death, and the men who died together are on the wall together. So the names of the first categories are on the right, and these are the names of the last categories are over here on the left. And the names are inscribed from 1957 to 1975, to the fall of Saigon, actually on this wall. This is Southeast Asia. You know, most Americans couldn't find Southeast Asia on the map prior to Vietnam. How many children do you know today going to school could find it on a map? Not too many. This is what it actually looks like. You notice China is to the north, of Vietnam. You see North Vietnam here, South Vietnam, this part of the map, Cambodia, Thailand, and what we call Myanmar or Burma is right off the map, off over to the left. This country has an interesting history. About 2 centuries before Christ, the Chinese annexed most of what you and I know as Vietnam. They occupied it for over 1,000 years. Most of the folks that live in Vietnam are ethnically Chinese or of Mongolian descent. They're able to rule somewhat independently after a series of crushed rebellions, at least into the 1850s, when the French take it over as a colonial power. And they will occupy Vietnam, ladies and gentlemen, from 1859 all the way up to 1940, when the Japanese invade this area. Now, why would you want to go to Vietnam? Because one of its chief exports is rubber. If you're looking for natural rubber in the world, you go to Southeast Asia. If you're the Japanese army during World War II, you need the rubber. So this is where you go. The Japanese forces occupy Vietnam. We know as Vietnam, French Indochina, what it was called back then, until 1945, at which time the French tried to regain control of the country. They tried to do that in a war up to 1954, and which was finally settled by the Geneva Accords of 1954, which basically partitioned Vietnam. The northern part would be occupied by Ho Chi Minh, who became the president of Vietnam in the Communist Party. The southern part of Vietnam would be turned democratic into a democracy. There were treaty obligations which obligated the United States to come to the aid of what became known as, what Larry, our board president, has said, the Republic of Vietnam. We don't have time this evening to get into all the complexities that resulted in America's involvement in Vietnam. In order to understand it, you have to understand the time frame that all of this is going on during the Cold War. What year does China fall to communists? 1949. What year is Korea invaded? 1950. If you're President Dwight Eisenhower in the White House, you are worried about global Soviet and communist domination. This governs U.S. military policy and strategic thought all the way through the next couple of decades. There was a meeting in January of 1961 between President-elect John F. Kennedy and the outgoing president, Dwight Eisenhower, in which Eisenhower is recorded to have said, we cannot let Laos become communist. We must watch Vietnam because it will fall like a set of dominoes. It was believed in the American mindset of the politicians that if one of these countries over here falls to communism, the rest will soon follow. Obviously, talking about what Southeast Asia, we know some of that didn't happen, but you have to understand the mindset of the politicians at the time that this went on here. America sent advisors. Eisenhower sent the first advisors to train and arm in the Republic of Vietnam. There were going to be elections in 1956. It was a foregone conclusion that if free elections were held in South Vietnam, it would be communist. So the elections were never held. During the Kennedy administration, between 300 American advisors, beginning in the Kennedy administration, swelled all the way to 16,000 American advisors during that administration. And of course, spilling into the Johnson administration. August of 1964, cruising out here with all Tonkin, a United States destroyer called the USS Motts was attacked by North Vietnamese patrol boats. And that set in motion a chain of events which would not end until the fall of Saigon in May of 1975. The resolution went before Congress and gave President Johnson the right to commit troops to the area to repel aggression as he saw fit. The first soldiers to be committed to Vietnam as combat troops in March of 1965. And from that day to the peace accords were signed in January of 1973, American combat soldiers fought and died in Vietnam. We know, ladies and gentlemen, that about 9 million veterans served during the Vietnam era. About 2.5 million actually served in the Southeast Asia theater of operations. We have many of those folks that are here in the room tonight. At peak strength, there were over 543,000 American servicemen and women serving in Vietnam in April of 1968. At peak strength, 500,000 Americans were serving. During the war, 58,229 folks died. We just mentioned that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, represents a death total of 319 servicemen a week. 319 a week. Think about that. Think about that when you look at the faces back in this display case. That's what we want you to think about. During World War II, that number was 2,198 men dying per week. Give you some comparison between the two wars. A number of these folks were from Cumberland County. This is Vietnam province. You can see it right here. Let's take a profile of the folks from Cumberland County. Let's take a look and let's see. Well, if you're from Cumberland County, how do you differ from everybody else who went to serve in Vietnam? I told you this list has 52 names. I had to divide it, ladies and gentlemen. I guess I didn't have to, but in the research, I've divided it into two separate lists. I wanted to find out those that had real hard county connection. Thus, the first half of this list, in alphabetical order, are 34 names. These individuals were born here in the county. One of these criteria. They lived here for at least 4 years. They graduated from high school here. Those 4 years of residence do not count if you went to Shippensburg or Dickinson College. Okay, so that's one set of groups. Second set of groups, the other 19 men that are in this list, are folks that have affiliation with Cumberland County. Maybe they served at Carlisle Barracks at the U.S. Army War College. Maybe the individual moved in here and then went off to war. Maybe they had residence at the War College, went off to war, were killed in Vietnam, and their family had residence here in Cumberland County. That's the other 19 folks on the list. Check out every name on this list because I've got a couple mysteries going on that I'd like to get solved here by the end of the project. Some of these men on our list that have been affiliated with Cumberland County, I cannot find out why they are affiliated with this county. So your help would be greatly appreciated. But I'm going to give you the statistics on the 34 men. We're going to profile 5 of those men tonight. Obviously, I can't take up time here this evening. I wish I could to tell you 34 stories or 52 total stories. Every story I collected is worthy of being told, I can assure you. But tonight, we're going to profile 5 of these individuals. This is the Cumberland County Historical Society, ladies and gentlemen. So 2 of those folks will be from the West Shore. 1 gentleman will be from Carlisle, and 2 servicemen will be from the western part of this county. We will do 5 county-wide. 2 from the West Shore, 1 Carlisle, 2 from the western part of the county. So let's give you some numbers of these men. How old do you think the average age of Cumberland County servicemen who died in Vietnam is? You hear this men, well, men who fought in Vietnam, their average age was 19. That does not hold up. If you look at the statistics produced by the National Archives and Records Administration on men who fought and died in Vietnam. If we say that the men who fought and died in Vietnam is a cross-section of the men and women who served there, we say that's a good cross-section, and we can bet that those statistics are going to be pretty accurate. The average age of a man who fought and died in Vietnam on the Vietnam Memorial is about 23.3 years of age. The average age of a man from Cumberland County who died in Vietnam, about 23 and a half. Almost a perfect match. The youngest, Ricky B. Newell from Lemoyne, was 19 years, 1 month, and 4 days. The oldest Cumberland County man to die in Vietnam was Major Corley Price Holler of Shippensburg. He was 44 years, 5 months, and 4 days of age. He died in May of 1964. Young to old, but the average, 23. Now, also, how about the men who fought? What was their enlistment status? They fought and died. Well, most men who went to Vietnam were drafted. True or false? Think it's true or false? It's false. Most men who went to Vietnam volunteered. As a matter of fact, on our list, 25 of the 34 voluntarily enlisted in the armed forces. That's a rate of 64%. 9 were drafted. The average, I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, of all men who went to Vietnam, 70% volunteered for military service. They didn't necessarily volunteer to Vietnam, but they voluntarily enlisted in the military. And about 30% were drafted. Little higher here for Cumberland County on the draft side, but not so much so. Most of the men were volunteers. Are they enlisted men? Were they private, sergeant, corporals, or were they officers? What do you all? Well, you think coming out of Carlisle Barracks, some of those men will be officers. That's why they didn't want to count those folks out there, because they skew the statistic. On the opposite side. Right? Actually, 85% are enlisted. The average on the Vietnam Memorial, 86.5%. Almost a perfect match. Marital status, are they single and married? Majority will be single, right? That's right. On the Vietnam Memorial, about 70% of the men on the Vietnam Memorial are single. For Cumberland County, 34 men who died in Vietnam, 21 were single. 57%. Now, what did they do in the military? What was their job? What was their military occupation specialty? What do you think? If they're most of these men, and then we're talking about here this evening, all of them are talking about here this evening, they died in Vietnam. Were they truck drivers by and large, or do you think they were infantry? Hard to guess there, huh? No surprises here when you look it up. Fully a third are Marine riflemen or light weapons infantry. That was their job in the service. 1/3 of this list that we're looking at right here. Education. How many times have you heard? Well, most of these men, they left high school and joined the service. Not true. Most in Cumberland County did not. Of this group of 34 men who died from Cumberland County in Vietnam, 88% were high school graduates. 25, ladies and gentlemen, of the 34 in this study. 5 left high school, 3 had some college, and one of the men in this study, one of the 34 in the first group, was a college graduate. And the average during the Vietnam War for high school graduates, the most educated group of men and women who ever went to war in this country, was about 65%. There's still 2/3 of the men fought in Vietnam were high school graduates. 88% either finished high school here, finished it in the Army right after they went in. So the highly educated group were those who fought and died here from Cumberland County. By religion, 18 of their religious affiliations, I know. Been able to research 18 and 34. This area, you know how it's settled. What would you guess would be their religious affiliation? Well, how about Lutheran? There's 5 there. 4 Methodists, 3 from the Church of God, 3 Roman Catholics, 2 United Brethren, 1 Presbyterian. Protestant, 83%. That's pretty close to what it is on the Vietnam War. Not too far away. So what can we say about the 34 men from Cumberland County who died in Vietnam? They're pretty typical, ladies and gentlemen. They're pretty typical. First of all, they were young, 23.5 years old. Most volunteered, most were single, most were Protestant. Most enlisted in the military service. At least 4 men in the case behind you actually volunteered to go to Vietnam, which might surprise most people. Might surprise most people in this room. Most were high school graduates as well. So that gives you some idea of the cross section of some of the people we're going to talk about here today. Different than what most people realize. Vietnam, as you see it here, well, where do they fight? Now you've heard a little bit about them. How about the country? How about the country America sends them to? It's divided into about 43 provinces. And these provinces would be equal to what we would call, ladies and gentlemen, as states here in the United States. Well, Vietnam is a tiny, tiny little country. How many times have you heard that? You know how big South Vietnam is? It's about 63,000 square miles. That is 1.5 times the size of Pennsylvania. If you put the top of South Vietnam on a map, lay it right over a map of the United States on the East Coast, and you put the top of it on Pittsburgh, guess where the bottom ends up? Got to lay it at Georgia. That's where the bottom ends up. This is not that real tiny small country. North and South Vietnam together is the size of New Mexico, ladies and gentlemen. It's over 127,000 square miles. Pretty good size. Now, population-wise, pretty well, size and a half of Pennsylvania. 12 million people live in Pennsylvania right now. During the Vietnam War, the total number of people who lived in Vietnam, in South Vietnam, was about 17 million. So populated. And the centers are around what we call the Mekong Delta, which is down here in South Vietnam. And of course, up on the top of North Vietnam, the Red River Delta. These were river basins, very prominent landmarks in Vietnam. That's where all a lot of the population is going to be centered around. What is the economy here? Well, you can bet you've got a lot of farmland here. 70% of Vietnam is agrarian, it's farming. What else? Well, we talked about one of those things. Very important, rubber. We always hear about rice. Vietnam today exports 24 million pounds of rice. That's third in the world. Coffee, tea, fishing industry there. They do make some fertilizer, some industry, but not a lot. Today, it ranks as one of the poorest countries in the world, especially one of the poorest in Southeast Asia. Per capita income about $220 a person per year. And that's it. Now, the weather. I'm sure a lot of the veterans here in the room can tell you about the weather in Vietnam. You've got 2 seasons in Vietnam, wet and dry. And I think the veterans here will tell you most of the time it's wet. Depending on where you're at in Vietnam. They have a monsoon season. Depending on where you're at in this country is depending on what the cycle is. If you are in the Central Highlands, which is right up in here, Central Highlands area, the rainy season is April to September, peaks in the summer. You're here on the coast, right along in here, the rainy season September to December. You're down here in the south part of South Vietnam, the rainy season is May all the way through around June or July. It depends on what part of the country you're in as to how the rains fall. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you the rain falls. So I tried to look up some of these. It's really hard to convert a lot of these numbers because in Vietnam you use a metric system. You all know how many inches are in a meter? Well, it's not easy. I'm supposed to know, but it's pretty hard. Try to figure out how many milliliters are in a cubic inch. It's not easy. It rains in Vietnam. The average rainfall in the United States is 4.5 cubic inches a year. Cubic inches a year, 4.5. You're up here in this part of the country, way up here in the northern section of the country, depending on where you're at, it can rain up to 183 cubic inches a year. That's 45 more rains here. So if you think you've got a lot of rain out here this week, I checked WGAL yesterday. We had 4.85 inches for mud. Measured straight inch. It rains all the time. Not only does it rain, what's the temperature like? Everybody can say it's hot. Boy, is it hot. The average temperature in Saigon here, the average temperature, 89.6 degrees. Guess what it is in Philadelphia for the year? 55 degrees. You want to make a nice comparison. If you're up in Pleiku, you're up in the Central Highlands. I know we have some veterans that leave for up in that part of the country. Your average temperature up there is about 71 degrees. The highest point in this country right up here is 8,500 feet. 8,500 feet up in the Central Highlands. We were scurrying around here today to try to find out what is it if you're up by Wagner's Gap. It's about 1,600 feet. So when you're looking for one of the highest, if not the highest place in Cumberland County, Wagner's Gap, on the North Mountain at 1,600 feet. In the Central Highlands of Vietnam, you're talking about 8,500 feet, approximately. And it can go from flat farmland all the way up into hills, depending on where it is. You can actually get some of this and show you as we go. The military divided Vietnam into 4 sections. Here you'll see it. Top part of Vietnam, they call I Corps, signified by Roman numeral 1. The central part of Vietnam, especially in the Central Highlands, 2 Corps. 3 Corps was around Saigon, capital of the Republic of Vietnam. 4 Corps was along the Mekong Delta. So the military divided this up for administrative purposes that you see here. This is what rice paddies look like from the air. If you are around Saigon, west of Saigon, if you're Kenny Down, Walnut Bottom, Pennsylvania, or you're Derry Liner from Shippensburg, Pennsylvania, you're operating out here in some flat areas. Matter of fact, these pictures were taken right near where those two men operated. This is what it looks like from the air. This is a rubber plantation from the air. Michelin Rubber Company owned a lot of the rubber plantation here. You see the rubber plantation? Here's the trees actually being harvested. These photographs come from 1966. These are 1966 photographs given to me by a friend of mine. So big economy here we're talking about rubber. There's your wetsuit. Look at the rain. So here's this shows you a truck in the mud. Armored cavalry vehicles could run. Most of the roads were not paved. You didn't have paved roads. You'd be lucky to get a crushed stone road, ladies and gentlemen. This is what it looks like if you're around the Saigon area during rainy season. That's what it looks like. This area is the flat area. You can see it. You can go from 0-degree elevation right up to a mountaintop. Some of the veterans in the room, they know this place. This is Nui Vai Dinh. It's in Tainan province. It's right near the Cambodian border, west of Saigon. It's a pretty famous landmark for those folks that fought there in that area. For any Marines in the room, you were up on the northern part of South Vietnam at the demilitarized zone. You might have been up at hill 881. That simply means it's a hill that's 881 meters high. And this photograph was taken from hill 881, looking north toward the DMZ. This photograph was taken in July of 1967. So take a look. Here's your flat part. You go right up to the mountains, and then you can see the hilly areas here. It could be triple canopy, it could be tropical, subtropical. My point in telling you this, ladies and gentlemen, is that in Vietnam, depending on where you serve, if you were a serviceman, the folks we're going to talk about here tonight, you can have a change of temperature as much as 60 degrees in a single day. And you're up in the Central Highlands, it can be cold. It's not all tropical. It depends on where you're at when you're operating. So this gives you some idea of the geography of the particular area that you see here. The service for an American serviceman, just like we're talking about here tonight, was a year. You were in the Army, a year. You're in the Marines, 13 months. Usually, if you had service there, I got one of my friends to give me a pay stub. What'd you get paid? Well, there's a pay stub of a corporal in the back, 1967, $2,346. What he was paid. A teacher here at Cumberland County in August of 1967, the same year, started $5,200. And of course, you get $52 of hazardous fire pay, HFP pay, which is in the back for being in a combat zone. But you don't get paid very much to be there. You have to put up with a lot of things. One of those, of course, are communist soldiers. The others are things that you probably never even think about when it relates to service in Vietnam. I'll give you a few. Leeches, mosquitoes, malaria, amoebic dysentery, dehydration. You can't drink enough water on operations in Vietnam. You just can't, as hot as it is. You're going to see several canteens on several of the people here. Heat stroke, heat exhaustion, snakes. You serve in the human forest, you might run into some tigers. Matter of fact, one of the veterans sent me a photograph of a tiger his team had killed while they were out on operation in Vietnam. You could carry 50 pounds of equipment. You could be out from your base camp 3-4 weeks at a time, operating, eating out of a CRAC can, pulling a little sleep. Kenny Dever wrote in one of his letters, you're tired all the time. That's about what you are. You're about tired all the time. Pull listening post rotation. And about halfway through your tour, you're going to get an R&R, rest and relaxation. You might go to Hawaii, Australia, Bangkok, a number of different places where that actually occurs. But it gives you some idea of what's going on when American combat soldiers get sent there overseas to fight in this war. Here is the northern part of the country. Let's break it down for you. This would what the I-Corps. It's got 3 provinces that are here. The next men we're going to talk about, ladies and gentlemen, are in these provinces right here. Twin Tree, Why not? These 3 you see right here. The next men we're going to talk about, all from there. Now, I discovered when I sit down and I looked at these names, the families, some of those that have come forward, like I said, I was going to talk about everybody. Those who came forward first, and those that had information beginning, those are the ones that are included here this evening. Certainly would have liked to have talked about everyone here, not able to do it. By the luck of the draw, 3 are Marines, 2 are from the Army. 3 died in the upper part of South Vietnam, this part you see right here. 3 died in the middle, or 2 died, excuse me, in the middle part of the fight. 3 in the upper part, 2 in the middle part of Vietnam. Here's a right along the demilitarized zone. So this is a close-up of this right here. The demilitarized zone was, I told you, the line drawn in 1954 by the Geneva Accords. It's about a 6-mile width line where there's not supposed to be military activity. Many Marine units operate in this area right here. You may recognize the names on this map. Khe Sanh, famous for a siege that was held there at the beginning of 1968 for 77 days. Dong Ha. Some of these names I'm sure people here in the room will know. This part right here is where Paul Vincent McHenry of Camp Hill operated with the 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines. People we're going to talk about here next. This is a picture of Paul. Paul was born on October 21st, 1946. He has 1 brother and 2 sisters. 1 sister here in the room today with us this evening. He's the son of N. John P. McHenry and Catherine McHenry. And his father was the director of programming in the Department of Labor and Industry for the state of Pennsylvania. Now, like many of the men that we have here in this study, the McHenry family was a military family. Paul's father had been in the military, his uncle had been in the military. His name for his uncle. His nephew's in the back of the room, just got here from Washington, D.C. Guess what his name is? Paul Vincent McHenry. The tradition has been carried on here in the family. He went to St. Teresa's Elementary School, New Cumberland, and Bishop E. Devon High School, where he graduated in 1964. He did attend college 2 years in Clearwater, Florida, when he left to enlist in the Marines. I'm told by his sister, parents wanted one thing, go to college, he wanted to know. Coming from a military family, want to get the service, pretty eager to get the service. So he'll join September of 1966, there's an active duty October of 1966. He was trained as a mortarman, an ammo carrier, and later as a forward observer in 81 millimeter mortars. And that's what this photograph, you know, when you're a curator, you're a historian, you love to get these field photographs, not closed photographs, but when his sister brought me this one, I just couldn't believe it. It's one of those photographs that you just really look at and you see a lot of interesting things that go on here. You might see the radio instead of behind his head right. Since he's a forward observer, needs that. Here's your radio, here's your telephone receiver part, here's your M16, the basic weapon carried by U.S. servicemen if you're an infantryman in Vietnam is the M16 rifle, 223 caliber, 5.56 millimeters. This weapon right here, you can see the ammunition, 20 to 30 round magazines. You can see he's got a full bandolier of ammunition. Hey, Mark, what do we talk about being dehydrated? Anybody count the number of canteens on him? Take a look at it. There's one. Matter of fact, look at that. That's a World War II style canteen. There's a collapsible canteen top right there. There's one there. There's one over here. He's got 3 canteens on it right there. And he's also got this World War II first aid kit, which is pretty interesting. Most of the first aid kits in Vietnam, you wear them on your shoulder. Well, remember this knife, because you're going to see it again. In the back of the case, in the back of this room this evening, there is a 1 to 50,000 gridded map of the northern section of South Vietnam, in this very area we just talked about a few minutes ago. The red portion of the map that is marked off today is the demilitarized zone. And it is believed to be the map that he has in his hand right there. Still full, it's unfolded in the case, right over there behind. Came back there with his belongings. He left by air from Camp Pendleton, California, got to Vietnam 6 August 1967. That's when he took office. He got arrived August 9, 1967. And he was a member of the headquarters and service company of the 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines. There's a big patch in the back that says the Thundering 3rd. You go back in the back, you can see it for his outfit that operated this part. Here's his kit. There's President KR-9. I guess I'd like to share that. You can see it right there. He's wearing an armor vest here in this picture. This is a really great in-the-field program. While he was serving there in Quang Tri Province, Paul was in at least 6 named operations. He was actually wounded in action in May of 1968. Here's some of his friends. Right here, this is a friend of his named Burt Lancaster, not the actor. Of course, I like this photograph that's him together. It's got sets of tags hanging on over here in the background. This is here in leisure time. Take a look at the background. Here's a beer can. See in the background. Here's a can of sea rats. Sea rations. Out on the battlefield magazine that he's reading and enjoying here out on the battlefield. Paul was in Operation Scotland II, and in June of 1968, his unit conducted operations around the Quezon area. We'll just talk a little bit about that. His outfit had, his whole battalion, the 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines, about 1,100 Marines operating in that area. And in the span of a month, they lost 173 killed or wounded in June of 1968. On June 15, 19 he was shot in the head and neck and instantly killed. Today, he rests in the Gettysburg National Cemetery. His father is in there, not too far from where he is. When he died, he was 21 years of age. Think about that. I just think that's good stuff. I got this picture in the mail from a man in Nokomis, Florida. Got on the internet, put a posting on, said, I'm looking for anybody that knows Colonel Robert Lee, West Fairview, Cumberland County. Lee was a Marine. He was in C Company, 1st Reconnaissance Battalion, United States Marines. I put a little post on the guest book. I said, I'd like to talk to anybody who knew him. Got a couple of responses back. Got one back from a man named Al Shaw. Shaw said, well, I not only knew Lee, but I was on the last patrol in which he was killed. I'll send you some photos. So next thing you know, in the mail, I get a CD full of photographs. So I open this photograph up. This is Sergeant Lee collecting information on the side of the hill here. Let me give you a little bit about it. He was born January 18, 1935. That makes him 33 years old, ladies and gentlemen, 1968. Born in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Went to school in the Harrisburg area and left John Harris High School in Harrisburg in 1951 at age 16. Carl Lee joined the Marines in February of 1952, just 2 weeks after his 17th birthday. Spent 3 years on active duty, joined the reserves in 1955. That was after he fought in the Korean War. I want you to know that. And he was a welder in West Fairview. He's listed in the West Shore Directory as a welder for the National Radiator Company in Middletown, Pennsylvania. That's what he did as a welder. Well, in 1964, he went back into service, even though he was married and had 3 sons. Went back on active duty, did a tour in Vietnam in 1964, and of course volunteered to go back in April of 1967. He was an experienced hand, no doubt about it. His unit was deployed to overlook a hillside on the 27th of February, 1968, outside the old provincial capital of Webb. These photographs were taken of Sergeant Lee on the 28th of February, 1968, in the evening, as he collects some brush on his hillside. So I asked Al Shaw when he sent these, I said, well, what, these are taken, you say they're taken February 28th. Well, Sergeant Lee died the next day. These photographs are probably the last known ever taken. The ones I'm going to show you right here. He was killed the next day in a mortar attack. I got this photograph. Here he is on the right-hand side. Here's the rest of the members of the team. I found 2 members of the 13-man patrol who were there on the 29th of February, 1968. One of them, a man named Tom Vanderloel from Michigan, wrote me this. It was getting almost dusk, and I think Sal walked up to me and said they were going down the hill to see if we could pick up some trick flares and claymores. They asked if I wanted to come along and run security for them. When we were about a quarter mile down the hill, I was watching them and anything else that might happen around us. When went out 15 or 20 minutes, when I heard mortars pop out of the tubes. All 3 of us looked at each other for a second, and I could see little puffs of smoke on the next ridge line. And then the whole top of the hill just exploded. I think Sergeant Lee and Frenchie were killed with the first rounds of orders. Our corpsman worked in trying to save Sergeant Lee and then Frenchie. He received the Bronze Star that day. It was getting dark now, and things were not letting up. At one point, Al came around to everyone and said to get as low as we possibly could. What was interesting about this letter, ladies and gentlemen, is he says, we had a briefing from Sergeant Lee before the patrol. We sat on a hill by choppers, and everyone talked about how small and open the hill was. There was one tree on the hill. After everything was over, we talked that the NBA probably used the tree to cite their mortars. That's what's in the left hand of this photograph, right here. That tree. The tree that is in this account, right here. Later Mullen goes on to say that the man by the name of Gilbert Fairbolt from Bristol, Connecticut, he's the man they call Frenchie. A lot of people in Vietnam had nicknames. And Sergeant Lee both died that night in that mortar attack. He said, I remember Sergeant Lee as a gun-ho Marine. I always felt safe and confident when he was taking us out on patrol. I think it was because of his experience and training. I remember one time when we were in the rear and we all wanted some alcohol, there was none to be found anywhere. Sergeant Lee told us how to make what he called applejack. So we went down the road one night in the Army mess and stole as many apples and raisins as we could find. Never turned out because we couldn't get the fire hot enough to distill it. I will always remember Sergeant Lee as a friend and leader. It gives you some idea. Anybody who knows Sergeant Lee's family, let me know. Got some information, including that account. I'd like to share it with them. Yeah. Sergeant Lee is buried at Woodlawn Memorial Gardens in Albany County. Here's the team. This is Frenchie right here. This is the man who sent me the photographs, Al Shaw. These are 5 of the men who were there that night on that patrol when Sergeant Lee was killed. These are Marines dressed in the field. Really great photographs. Now, this is our Carlisle person, Gary Lee Ream. I know got almost the whole Ream family here, don't we? I think they're all down here towards the front. Can't say too much, they jump up here. There's safety numbers. They're all front here. Gary was born on July 25th, 1946. The son of Lois K. Ream and Wallace R. Ream Sr. His sister told an interesting story. He was the smallest of 6 children born to his mother. She said, when she first told me this story, he weighed over 8 pounds. So the family called him Peanut. Peanut. If you go in the back of the case, you'll see Gary signed his letter to his family, Peanut. So he actually signed his letter. He was one of 6 children. As I mentioned, he had 2 sisters and 3 brothers. We've got a portion of the Ream family here this evening with us. As I mentioned, one came all the way from California to be here with us this evening. Gary's brother. Gary attended Wilson Elementary, LaFord Elementary, Lamberton Junior High. You all know these names in the Carlisle area. Graduated Carlisle Senior High in 1964. The same class that Edward J. Rykowski. Another Marine, never come back from Southeast Asia, from the Carlisle High School as well. Enjoyed baseball, basketball, and football. Gary came from a strong military family, just like Paul McHenry, a bunch of Marines here. 2 of his brothers Marines. One has served between Korea and Vietnam. The other one in the Marine Reserves. His brother-in-law was Marine. Guess you know how much choice there is. Branch of service you're going to go in. He enlisted after his graduation, went on a cruise in the Mediterranean, and was sent to Vietnam as a member of Company C, 1st Battalion, 1st Marine Regiment. And in November of 1966, they operated off the coast of Vietnam. This is a picture of the last time the entire Ream family was together. All the children. This is Gary, right here in the middle. So this is Ream, right here on the side. This is 1962 up at State College, Pennsylvania, at the graduation of one of the brothers there. This photograph is in the back. So it's the last one of them all seen here together. And of course, you have a picture of Gary in his Marine uniform. You like that transformation? It's always neat to see that, isn't it? Transformation. Well, there were 40 different engagements in November of 1966, the month that Gary died, with his unit on the coast of South Vietnam. And early one morning on November 3rd, 1966, a party of about 10 Marines went on a patrol, a sweep. Gary was one of those. He was the point man. If you're the point man, that means you're out front. Well, we were able to find someone, a man by the name of David Brooks, who lives in Las Vegas, Nevada, who was on that patrol. And he leaves us an account of how Gary saved the lives of the other folks in his youth. You know, just read it quickly here. It's pretty there. For the life of me, I can't remember which squad was doing the patrol. You see, I was the machine gunner with the first platoon. And I know at the time, Lance Corporal Lefter, or Lefty as we called him, was the squad leader. I would say second squad patrol. I was part of the patrol. Bill Carpenter and Marine were the point elements in the patrol. I was in the middle. We were out maybe about a half an hour into the patrol, and we came into a rice paddy, not as large, but still a paddy off to the right. And we spotted a male, and he started running. We told him to stop several times, but he kept running. He led us onto a little trail. We started firing at the male. We hit it not bad, but he kept running, and he was into a paddy. And Carpenter and Green at this point went running to cut him off. And as we were on a hard-packed trail, it led us around at an easy, led them around as an easy angle to cut off his escape. They reached a pine-covered area just before the bill. Paddy was off to the right. It was here that all hell broke loose. And they walked right into an ambush in the pines. Both were hit in the chest, and the corpsmen were working hard. The male was caught. Turned out that he was a BC, and it was his job to be on the lookout for the ambush and to lead the squad into it. Looking back, these two Marines saved the lives of the rest of the squad, and maybe from walking into this ambush. That's the way I remember it. It might differ in a few details of memory, but it was a long time ago. Sincerely, Gunnery Sergeant David Brooks, retired, United States Marine. Gary is laid to rest in Ashland Cemetery here in Carlisle. It's pretty interesting. We've been able in our research to try to help the families out. In some cases, in this case, I know the Reeves family case, they hadn't talked to anybody who was with Gary when he died. And we were able to, through the process of doing the research here, to actually make that happen. We were glad to do it. This is Kenny Dever, Walnut Bottom. Dever family is right in the front row. They've got no obstacles between me and the podium. Kenny was the eldest of two sons, born to Samuel Pete Dever, who's right up here in the front row, and Elizabeth Catherine Morgan Dever of Walnut Bottom, who's called Buck by his friends. His father was a veteran of World War II, of the China-Burma India Theater, and worked at the mechanics for Gatling. That's another recurring theme. Not only do these folks come from military families, ladies and gentlemen, they had fathers that were in service. A lot of them spent time in World War II. You can see why some of these men would want to go into the service. Kenny attended schools locally, Jacksonville Elementary, and then graduated from Big Spring High School class in 1966. Here. And he excelled in sports, both baseball and football. You go in the back, you can see his Letterman jacket, twice lettered in those sports. We had Big Spring School here last week. They all recognized, there was hardly anything they recognized exhibit, but they did recognize that big letter B back there on Kenny's Letterman jacket. He was drafted into the service on December 2nd, 1966, trained at Fort Knox in Fort Polk, Louisiana, and he left for Vietnam on May 18, 1967 from Dulles Airport. Guess when this photograph was taken? 18 May 1967. This will be the last time his family will see him before he ships to Vietnam. He'll report to Vietnam in the lower portion of the country, and he was a gunner on an armored cavalry vehicle. These are armored cavalry vehicles, ladies and gentlemen. They're armored personnel carriers have been specially fitted. He was a gunner on one of these vehicles. This is an interesting photograph. It's not a deck of Kenny's unit, but it is of an armored cavalry unit. Look what you see in the hands of these men right here. Look how they're shaking hands. This photograph is properly titled Going Home. These are members of an armored cavalry unit with their personnel records in their hand, ready to ship and rotate out of Vietnam. When you are a curator like me and you're trying to research the Vietnam War, you become a master at the acronym and the abbreviation. So many of them you can't even remember. They've got a fancy word for this called HEROES. date eligible return overseas. They get you with all these acronyms. You have to have, there is a dictionary in Vietnam War, by the way. So people like me can figure out what all these mean. This is an armed cavalry unit. These men are going to report home. This is Kenny's track. His armored cavalry unit. Look what it says. Hang on, Snoopy. One of these pictures I was going through, I don't have it in here, said, happiness is knowing you've made it through another day. It's on one of the images that I had. He's wearing an armored vest here, as you see. His unit operated west of Saigon, usually in that particular area. It would be in this area here. Here's all of South Vietnam. Here's Saigon, the capital. Usually over in here. When Kenny was killed in this province, right down here. When he was on an operation in early 1968. That Black Virgin Mountain, some of the veterans knew by name that I showed you earlier, is right up here. So this is a map of the provinces of what we call Freecourt around Saigon. Remember Gia Dinh, because that's where Kenny Dever died. Ben Dong, that's the next person we're going to talk about. Gary Lyman, both in these provinces here. Kenny on a track vehicle. Here he is with his pet monkey. Down Tiang, I'm told his father had a pet monkey in service as well. Kenny went out on an operation called the Operation of Hot Moon. That was the name of this particular operation. And on the 10th of February, 1968, while operating as a gunner on his track, it went through to do a sweep, and it came to the assistance of an infantry unit that was already tied up in the operation. And as it went through this particular operation, Kenny being a gunner, he had to hold off a lot of the fire. Now, he's on the lieutenant's track. He always says in his letters he likes to be on the lieutenant's track, because when you're on the lieutenant's track and the commander of the track is in there, what does that mean? That means you know everything before anybody else does. Because when that radio cracks, you're there. You're right in the middle of the action. And it's in this operation, while going to the assistance of the 27th Infantry Regiment, that his track is struck by a rocket-propelled grenade, and Kenny was killed. One of the men nearby, a man named Dwight Birdwell from Oklahoma, jumped out of his track, tried to run over and save Kenny. Blew the lieutenant right out of the track. Birdwell actually wrote a book about this, which is available. You can buy it. It's called 100 Miles of Bad Road, an armored cavalryman in Vietnam. As a matter of fact, this picture, I think, is featured in the book. It's one of the pictures in the book that the Dever family graciously allowed Birdwell to have. And he makes a point, you always want to go out and try to help him as much as you could. Unfortunately, by the time he got there, of course, Kenny had passed away. He was missing for some time, and his body was returned, and he is buried in Spring Hill Cemetery in Shippensburg, as are several of the men in this particular study. This is one of the interesting pieces in the exhibit. Saw paper, you might remember this. This was a letter that was in the back of Kenny's photo album, which his brother Richard brought here to the society. His mother had started that album in December of 1966. She ended it on March 18, 1968. The last page in it, taped, is this letter. This was a letter sent to Kenny Dever, who had just made sergeant 2 days before his death. It was sent to him by his neighbor in Lowell Bottom, David McBeth. David McBeth is in the room here this evening. This letter is marked return to sender. You'll notice it is marked over here and missing, placed there. So that kind of gives you a time frame. It's about a week after Kenny's one of his letters home. He said, you don't realize what you missed until you don't have it. You don't realize what you have until you don't have it. Yeah, let's talk about the far end of the county. We wrap up. Gary Lee Lyman, right here. His brother Larry in the room this evening. Larry's a Vietnam veteran himself. I have to say, Larry kind of took me under his wing a little bit. Gave me a crash education course in Vietnam 101. We talked fairly often about Vietnam and about some of the experiences. That's my pleasure to be able to hear some of these things, talk to the veterans about what they went through there. It helps me present the program, helps me understand some of the items that we have here in the exhibit, collecting this information. Gary was born on the 29th of August, 1947. He's the twin son of Woodrow and Mildred Leininger. His father was a veteran of World War II. Get this, his grandfather was a veteran of World War I. His great-grandfather was a veteran of the Civil War. Came from 4 generations of a military family. His father worked as a mechanic at Leatherton Army Depot, and Gary attended Shippensburg schools on the vocational track and left high school on the 10th of March, 1965, and joined the United States Army. Finished high school while he was in the Army. His brother, Larry, who I just mentioned earlier, left a week early. Both of the brothers went into service within a week. Both of the brothers served in Germany. Same time, both of them went to Vietnam. As a matter of fact, they signed waivers so they could fight in Vietnam together. Both of them volunteered for combat duty. Here. Gary got to Vietnam June 1966 and was assigned to the 14th Combat Aviation Battalion as a security platoon soldier. He was a rifleman, ladies and gentlemen, a light weapons infantryman. And he was transferred to Company C, 3rd Battalion, 22nd Infantry Regiment of the 4th Infantry Division. And from the 28th of November, 1966, to the 14th of May, 1967, Gary Jeter was involved in an operation called Fort Nisqually. Now, they had all kinds of weird names in these operations. Jeff Stewart, Attleboro, I can quote them. Jenny Devers' operation in Saratoga. So there's plenty of names for these operations. Well, this operation lasted, Fort Nisqually lasted pretty long. It was in 2 provinces in the same area that I just showed you. And on the 16th of January, at about 3:30 in the afternoon, a recon unit from one of Gary's patrols came in contact with the enemy, and they needed a relief force. Now, these men had just got into base camp. Volunteers were called for, and Gary was one that came forward to volunteer to go out and help this recon platoon that had got tangled with some Vietnamese soldiers here. I like this picture because it shows as Gary's out in the field, you can see how wet. You've got wet boots. You see everybody's trying to dry out here. Remember we talked about how wet it was. You're trying to dry out jungle rock, immersion foot. You imagine you've got trench foot. Your skin is real long. Regular leather boots, they don't work. You've got to have boots that they tried to redesign in the Army to have a mesh with some drain holes. Don't drain the water out there. I like this shot because they're all trying to dry out. These are several of his friends right here. This man, Larry, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is O'Neill, is that right? That's correct. Okay. We've got a letter that was written in 1993 by this man right here from Texas that describes these men going out to rescue this recon platoon. You'll notice the smoke in the background. This is what is said. I was about 4 or 5 feet from Gary the day he was killed. We were on a road going to reinforce a recon platoon in a hurry when the point man set off some tripwires to a considerable amount of ordnance. Gary and I were blown about 10 feet in the air. From blast, according to Tom Mohair, that was a friend of theirs from Wisconsin, who's also living, who was directly behind him about 6 feet. Gary took full charge of the blast, but even as he was dying, he was firing his rifle into what he thought was an ambush. Mohair moved to render aid and lay down covering fire in the event of the attack as blast rang out. They tried to save Gary, but he passed away. Airstrikes were called in. And what's interesting is I went down to the National Archives with his brother here in the room. We pulled out some reports. We found a report of this operation. I got to be there when he found the report. We looked at it together. And in that report, it talked about airstrikes. Well, lo and behold, come back. This photograph, which was sent by one of the members of the unit to the Leininger family, is taken from base camp, where they started from, and look what's in the back. There's the airstrike smoke. That's the actual smoke from the airstrike at the time that he was killed. So, to me, this kind of image, I think, he was 19 years old at the time of his death. He died in January of 1968. He was 19 years old at the time of his death. He also is over at Spring Hill Cemetery, ladies and gentlemen. I wish time permitted us to talk about more. Unfortunately, it doesn't. But I think suffice to say that you can see it from the full range of the county, Marines, Army, doesn't matter. I think what's important to us here is documenting the history of the men who fought and died. And I know it's important for the families to hear that. I sent a bunch of questionnaires out. I know I was a real pain. I guess the families like to hang me up here from the yard. I was a real pain. I asked a lot of questions. It's part of my job to ask a lot of questions. While I was asking the questions, one of the questions I asked was, what do you think these men died for? There are all kinds of responses. Well, they died to fight communism, of course. Big response. Several, of course, said they died fighting for what they thought was right. And then you always get the comments that they died for their friends. And really, when it comes down to it, ladies and gentlemen, that's what these folks here, I think, died for. I think that's something we all need to remember here. When you're in a combat zone, it's you and your friend. And I know that one of the mothers I'd asked to do this project, and her son was killed in 1970, and I asked her to write a couple words about her son. And this is what she sent me. And I think it speaks to all 52 names on this list. It speaks to the 33 that are on the first part of this list, the 19 that are on the second. It also speaks, ladies and gentlemen, to the 5 men who profiled in this room today. This isn't Wayne Motts saying. This is a mother saying. I asked her to tell me her memory of her son. This is what she wrote. I think it's real interesting. I think every family here would feel the same way. Joe was my first woman, which is always a joy in itself. It would be very hard to pick one or even two particular times or things in his life that were more joyous than another. I can say he was everything you could ask God for in a son, and he was a total joy to me in his short life. I can say with all my heart, I am very proud that my son gave his life for his fellow brothers in the service. You turn over this brochure, ladies and gentlemen. When you read this, you turn over the brochure that's in your hand. You look on the last page. And at the bottom, there's a passage I think that just about every soldier lives by. From the 15th book of John, the 13th verse. Greater love hath no man than this, and he lay down his life for his friends. And that's what you just saw in this room. We're pleased here at Cumberland County Historical Society to be part of those that help document this unwritten chapter in our county's history. We're pleased to do that. Pleased to have the families with us for your decision. We want to thank you for coming out, and I'll be happy to entertain any questions.